But I wanted to start off and thank Lisa and the University of New Mexico and this whole ecosystem for inviting me and inviting me in over the last 18 months. I live in Silicon Valley. I came here for many years, to go to the arts, the opera, all of those things. I knew a lot about the history here, but I really didn't appreciate it. I really didn't appreciate it. And about 18 months ago, I joined America's Frontier Fund. And America's Frontier Fund is a venture fund with a new model of trying to build up America's infrastructure strategy and capabilities. As a tourist, I didn't think about this place. But as I came here and started thinking about America's Frontier Fund's challenge of how to reinvigorate, how to keep America first and foremost in technologies and entrepreneurship, I realized that it couldn't happen just on the coast. It just couldn't happen on the coast. And as you know, all the press that we're seeing everywhere is the United States is not punching above its weight anymore. It's losing out in category A and AI, you're seeing it's starting to lose. You see all this stuff out of China. You see the world is competing, and the world is competing better than us. So what does that mean? We have to figure out ways to accelerate technologies, entrepreneurship, to maintain the competitiveness of the United States. But why does that matter? Why does it matter? I think over the next few years, if we are not leading in technologies, the standard of living for all of us starts to go down, right? And it's going to be no longer about simple tech. I've been in Silicon Valley for a lot of years. We could start a company in a couple of hours, right? And then we could have, we toss stuff on the cloud. We outsource our HR to, some PEO. We did all of that. That is changing. You're just seeing it change. I mean, no one, and what does that mean? It means that deep tech, hard tech is going to be at the forefront of what's going to happen. Stu was talking about bioscience, right? Bioscience, is a kind of a bright light here in the state, in the sense of, you have the labs and you have the others and all those other things that happen. But it's going to be about these deep technologies that are going to be important going forward. And what better place, Stu brings up $9.1 billion, it's going into research here. So how do we take advantage of it? And what are the trends that we're seeing, okay? And I'm going to talk about those trends, but I want to also talk about what's, a couple of observations that why places like New Mexico are becoming more and more important. First of all, I'm a venture capitalist. That's, I really pretend that we're mission driven. We pretend we have all these things, but I work for people who care about profits. Okay, those are the limited partners. Luckily, I'm part of an organization that also has a nonprofit and a mission to itself, but nevertheless, VCs invested on the coast. VCs vested on the coast. If you look, some of the stats that probably Stu found where, how much money went to Silicon Valley, it followed, when I was young, you didn't actually get real funding unless you had the common sense to move to Silicon Valley. Right, your VC would say, where do you live? And if you said you didn't live within driving distance of their office, and I will use the word his, because in those days it was a his, they wouldn't give you funding. That's no longer the case. The VCs have realized they cannot make the money they need by just investing on the local economy. That's good for New Mexico, right? Because they have to bring out. Why do you think all those venture funds, are open to putting the money into New Mexico? Because they realize that there's good tech here, right? So that's the first thing that could. Second, as Stu brought up, government R&D. Government R&D. it's been increasing dramatically with the Build Back Better, with all these other, with the CHIPS Act, with the, just general defense spending increases. A lot of that money, $9 billion. My estimate it was closer to 10, but that's a lot of money. Unfortunately, there's a downside, and this is the opportunity for New Mexico. How much of that venture money actually has made it to New Mexico? When $9 billion comes in one end, how much venture comes out the other side? Anybody guess? Small number. 100 million, sometimes it's 200 million a year. That means for 9 billion in, you're getting 100 million out. That means it's pennies on the dollar. Pennies on the dollar. So that's a bad economic model for somebody in Washington who's thinking about money spent, what's the output? It's bad for venture in the sense that they're missing an opportunity. But it also shows you how, there's something broken. And I think all of you are trying to fix what's broken and try to leverage what's broken here. The other thing that venture capital did stupidly is they undervalued when they came here or when they went to around the country. We undervalued it. If you look at how much a similar company raised in even Texas, which has a little stronger ecosystem, Atlanta, anywhere, all of those locations were undervalued. We kind of came in and we undervalued the tech and the people and the things. What did that mean is we gave too little money, right? Because we didn't want to own, 50% of the company when you come in. You want to own 20% of a company when you come in. So that means you had small rounds, which in itself was a cycle, which ended up causing companies to kind of struggle when they shouldn't have struggled if they were valued on their science. So when I was back at AFF looking for places to go, I started thinking about unicorns. Everybody know what a unicorn is? That's a company with over $1 billion, not venture valuation, not necessarily Wall Street valuation, but nevertheless, it's kind of what you strive at. And if you know much about venture capital is all about the winners. It's the big time. We, as an organization, have unfortunately built up an ecosystem that we only can invest in disruptive, big changing, big value kind of companies. All right? What does that mean is we have to invest in companies that we think can be worth $1 billion, right? That limits you back to Stu's thing of how do we get smaller businesses and lifestyle businesses. And that economic development is something that I'm not qualified to talk about, but is something that one needs to consider, that not all startups need to be billion-dollar startups. Therefore, when one thinks about economic development, you should also think there are venture-backable companies, and then there are bank investable companies or friend and families investable businesses. But you should think about the ecosystem as not all businesses and all entrepreneurs need venture backing. But I'm going to spend more time on the venture backing because that's what I'm about. When I think about it, one of the things that we started looking at, and I'll give you a couple stats like Stu, we kind of came up with how many unicorns should have been created in an ecosystem based on R&D dollars, citations, patents, ecosystems of professors. And we kind of came up with a little metric, okay? And we said, all right, let's go across the country and kind of think about that. Well, we were at the point where New Mexico should be creating 1 to 2 unicorns a year, right? 1 to 2 unicorns a year. And you sit there and you go, well, that's not a lot at some level, but it only takes one to make an ecosystem. Dell, Shopify in Canada, Spotify in Stockholm. I'm giving you the other ones that everybody does, is Microsoft, unfortunately, in Redmond. And all of those, it is what the opportunity is that we're missing here, all right? So there's also a Stanford professor who kind of came up with, well, how bad is New Mexico really doing? Okay, and he did this, if anybody saw it on LinkedIn recently, basically came up, looked at 1,000 startups, plus or minus, decided that 1.24% can be traced back to New Mexico. What does that mean? 1.2% isn't a lot, but it actually is a lot. It's 10 to 15 startups that can be traced back to New Mexico. None of them are in New Mexico, right? And but what does it mean? It's another indication of the potential here. It's 2.8. When we go to rating, it's 2.8 times more likely that that startup would succeed and become a unicorn if it was based on New Mexico technology, right? Well, that's another indication that good things can happen here. So how do we think about New Mexico, who has a little bit, has made incredible progress, what was this, the number for rainforest, what was this number, was it the sixth of these economic council meetings, right? Yeah, right? I mean, think about it, all this obvious group of people here, a lot of progress is being made, but as I see it as an outsider, and I will say I'm an outsider very strongly, is it still seems like disparate activities, not coordinated. And this is a challenge to the state and others, is to think about how to tie all this together from idea all the way out to scaled company. There are lots of great programs and everything. But when I was step back and took what Lisa asked me to think about is, what's happening in the trends? What's happening? What's going to happen in the future? What do we think about the future? And I'm going to talk about a few of them. Workforce, technology, a little bit about capital, a little bit about startups. Okay? So the first is, what's the trends in workforce? Good? Is it good for New Mexico, bad for New Mexico? All right? And so think about it. Remote and flexible work is here to stay. I would say that's good for New Mexico, right? I mean, it's, people, work-life balance is part of the environment here, right? People are more about moving and leaving and going to new locations. Good for attracting people to the state. COVID made it easier for people to move because one partner didn't have to if you wanted to move to New Mexico, your partner didn't have to also get a job here, right? So you could attract talent because you only had to get half the equation done. That's good for New Mexico. The downside of that is, if you don't have good jobs, people, it's just as easy to leave, right? The second thing is aging workforce. Aging workforce, right? It's dramatically increasing. Good for New Mexico, bad for New Mexico. Kind of semi-good for New Mexico, given that it's a retirement area. Well, one of the trends that we're seeing in retirement is kids want to move near where their parents are. We're seeing this in Arizona, and we're seeing this in other states, where people, Florida, for example, well, I don't know, I haven't any stats on New Mexico, but aging probably is good for New Mexico. One, also, you tend to have a kind of a bifurcation on age too in certain parts of the society as well. So there's actually a lot more younger people than you think, also available for creating workforce. The next one is, what's going to happen with the idea of diverse workforce? Our workforce is going to be more diverse in the future or less? I started, as I said, I came from Silicon Valley, where it was all males, right? It was all males, right? But the diverse workforce is actually good, again, for New Mexico, right? Organizations are going to want diversity on working for them. That's good for New Mexico. I don't know if you know this, but New Mexico's top 10 diverse state, in the country. Next one, rural versus urban, right? I grew up in New York City. I miss it still after all these years, but nevertheless, many people are moving out to less dense populated areas. Good for New Mexico. The bad side of the workforce is you still don't have ways to attract other than retired C-suite execs, right? C-suite execs is hard, right? So what is important here? To think about programs for C-suite execs. Can you really offset getting them to come here, right? It's not about just, offsetting $100,000 for a couple of engineers. It's actually how do you attract C-suites and people to come here and have programs for them. The second of all is just how do you make coming here easy? Adam Hammer, who's the head of Roadrunner, and I were talking about this last night. Is we have some people who want to move here from Roadrunner, which is our startup studio just around the corner from here. It's hard. It's hard. If you don't know this state, it's hard. Where do I live? All the classic things. And there are some programs, but there's an opportunity here to make it a move to the state program that is strong on solving all these basic, simple issues. Because what happens is, and I was seeing it with one of the women who's thinking about moving here, is it's too many unknowns. It's too many unknowns when I move here. And yet, so I'm gonna maybe think about moving where my parents are, which is in the next state over, right? So think about what programs you can do to make it easier for people to move here. There are lots of little pockets of it, but they're not done. The last one I want to talk about in workforce is that the workforce is going to continually need to learn new skills. It's no longer you go to law school and you're a lawyer, or you do these continuing ed or whatever they call those, continuing credits. Everybody's going to need to learn for their life. How is that going to change UNM? How is it going to change just how corporations teach their people? They need to have lifelong learning. And it's not just become better at their job, it's become better for their new jobs. And that's something that's an opportunity for states and universities to kind of think about how their education is evolving. And I know educators better than me who are thinking about this all the time, but lifelong learning is going to be a potential problem for the state unless it shows that the people can evolve as technology accelerates. So I think if we put the scale up or down for workforce, New Mexico is leaning in a good positive direction for the future, all right? Technology, right? What's going to happen in technology? We all hear about quantum and advanced communications and AR, VR and autonomous vehicles and all of these things. The good thing is, back to the $9.1 billion, they all start, right? They all start there. It starts in the lab. It starts in the, under the grant. It starts those. And that gives us an advantage here. So when we think about a couple of these ones, I'm not going to go over the ones that Stu, maybe a little bit, that Stu talked about, there's manufacturing, additive, advanced, whatever you want to call it, whether it's for the space industry or even the bio industry. It's gonna be just incredible. I mean, I already begin to see it, AI controllable robots, AI assistants over my head. The next 10 years are gonna be amazing. Actually, whether it's totally good for people or not, I think is to be determined, but nevertheless, it's gonna be amazing as a technologist. We're seeing the move to supply chain simplification and resiliency, right? That's important. You're going to see a lot more locally designed, locally produced, locally consumed efforts. That's good for every state because they're going to be able to pull in what they do well and do it locally. You're going to see new markets, which, bio is probably the most promising one in the state. And you're going to see Industry 4.0. What is Industry 4.0? Industry 4.0 is, hey, We don't make stuff the way we used to. We have IoT, we have big data analysis, we have machine learning, we have large language models telling us what to, and everybody, and the industry is so censored and overanalyzed that every step can be optimized. What does that mean for the state? It means that places where research is being done in industries and IoT and materials and data collection and all those are going to have an advantage, right? So all of that in terms of advanced manufacturing, I think is opportunity here. The next one, so for those of you who don't know, I've spent a lot of my years in Hollywood, and it seems Hollywood didn't come up with Stu, and it's something that there is a real potential here, right? I ran a research lab, created a research lab for Hollywood called Movie Labs. We thought about this stuff. It was a future thing, thinking about this all the time for the studios. And, I know it's a bad word, AR, VR, MR, mixed reality. It's happening. You asked me 5 years ago, I say never. You asked me this year, I'd say absolutely. If you see some of the technology that's happening, even at CES this week, the Consumer Electronics Show, and you're seeing now just not good visual displays, not the goggles that Apple's putting out, but the next generation that's coming out after that, that I can't imagine that in 10 years, any of us who wear glasses are not going to have augmented reality glasses. Why not? It tells you it'll be as important as your phone. Right? It'll be as important as your phone. What does that mean? What does it mean for the state? Well, the state is already starting to become a creative hotbed with the film industry. Well, it takes content creators for this world too. And there's a real opportunity for the state to not only just worry about sound stages, but to worry about what the future of creativity is going to be. And this is a place for expansion, and a place where you're already starting to have a reputation here. The last one I think I'm going to talk about in terms of technologies is defense tech. I spend a lot of time in defense tech across the country, and dual-use tech. The good thing is it's happening in the way that it hasn't happened in my life. Is that startups are now being appreciated in the defense world. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, defense startups were, basically cyber mills, or those are grant mills that did small technology output. And they were really never creating big companies. They were, it was rare. But in the last few years, 15, 20 years ago, you had Palantir. Now you have Anduril. You obviously have SpaceX and some of these other companies that are doing defense and dual-use technologies at scale, right? This is a real opportunity for the state. You already have a gazillion cleared people. I mean, you probably have more cleared people per unit of people than anywhere in the country, yet you don't have you don't have the infrastructure for it yet. You don't have the SCIF that anybody could rent. The SCIF is a secure location where you can do SCIF secure type stuff. You don't have this ecosystem, but this is a real opportunity to have labs and stuff that is focused on defense. This is a real opportunity, and it will be easier for people to leave and move, if they had a place where they could take advantage of the skill that they've developed in the labs. And so I think in the next 10 years, as we spend more money on defense and we spend more money on dual-use technologies, as well as the technologies that used to not be useful by the defense industry are already very useful by, starting with AI, obviously cyber, even energy, even the battery stuff Stu's talked about, this is all important to the defense industry. And there's a real opportunity in the next 10 years to take advantage of that. These are just a couple that I want to talk about of trends of what's happening. Energy, obviously, we all know what's happening in energy and that there's a real opportunity in the state here. we have real opportunity in the state and just taking advantage of the data that it creates in the labs. And I want to double down on the labs and the university. For me, there's this word called translation. If you know it's how to take stuff out of a lab and translate it into a company. It's still broken, still broken. It's still, I mean, it's not here that it's broken countrywide. NSF put in place a organization that's just trying to solve why so many billions of dollars go in and hardly anything comes out. DARPA puts in their Office of Commercialization, also trying to solve this. DOE puts people in charge to think of it. The government is doubling down on trying to figure out why not as much oil comes out of the well. And that's opportunity because you have so much stuff, underground in the well. And I'll give a recommendation later. I know Lisa works on this every day, but it's just not easy. We're trying to. I was told by one of the organizations that, named not to be named, that it's really easy to license from us. It probably takes 6 to 9 months. 6 to 9 months, right? And we can't tell you the terms until you tell us what you want to do with our technology, right? It's not a two-way street. So the labs are going to become more important over the next 10 years, all right? If they don't, and if we don't figure it out, somebody in Washington is going to say, you know what, that FFRDC, federally funded lab, we're cutting your budget because we're not going to see the output, right? I also work with a few foundations. Years ago, foundations said, we'll give you money, it sounds like you're doing good stuff, all right? Now they're going, what have you created? What impact have you had? That mantra is starting to go through any organization that gives out money. Tell me, and not a vanity metric, some metric that says, we put this many licenses, how many jobs are created over time? How much economic development has happened in this region? Tell me that this dollar was worth it, all right? And that mentality is changing rapidly. You're gonna see it rapidly. You're gonna see, I'm already seeing it in grant applications of, it used to be, tell us your commercialization plan. Now it's, let's talk about your commercialization plan. Before it is, let's not give you more money until you show us that you executed on that commercialization plan. The next area is capital. And I think I don't want to belabor the point of what Stu put up, but it's changing. Stu pointed it out. It's good for New Mexico. It really is. It's not just that these venture funds want to come here. It's that they know that there's something worthwhile coming here. So that's a good thing. What's bad is it's still hard for them to find out what's worth investing, right? They're coming to me and coming to Adam at Roadrunner to, say, hey, give us a window into this world. So when you think about it, think about how you can, up the visibility of what's happening here in a way that attracts capital. It's not a website. It's not it's things like this event can help. It's other ways of, promoting the state and promoting what's available in the state. Because while the money is there, it's not going to come here unless it feels like it will result in a win, right? Because everybody knows, right? A venture capitalist is, if they were a baseball player, what would be their batting average? 200 hitter. 200 hitter, they wouldn't even yet, right? They're 200 hitters. Well, if they're 200 hitters, for those of you who know baseball, that means you might not make the majors, is that they're 200 hitters, therefore they're risk adverse even though they pretend they're not. Okay, they're risk adverse even though they pretend they're not. And why? Because we have to feel comfortable. And what is meaning to feel comfortable as a capital provider is I have to kind of realize if the earlier stage of the company it is, the less likely I want to give you money unless I feel comfortable that I can trust you. I have to trust you. I give you the money. You really don't have anything. You tell me you're going to use this tech. You're going to do this. I got to figure out how to trust you. Okay. And how do I trust? It's all about team. And so the team does not only has to have a pedigree, it has to have a take no prisoners feel about them. And that I realize if I give you the money, if I give you my money, you'll treat it like your own. All right. And I don't care about lifelong balance and all these other things that I care about you using that money to make me money. All right. So venture still needs that. So when you think about it is how do you get people comfortable that the entrepreneurs are here, the science is here and worth investing. Lastly, I'll talk about startups. All right. We know this ecosystem is still emerging here. We know it still needs to create a even more robust environment. I mentioned things like creating labs and get capital. We got if you think about it, team, market, capital, technology. You're starting to get raising the grades, but it's still not perfect yet here. And if you asked somebody still in Silicon Valley if they would tell somebody to come to, remember when I started in Silicon Valley, they said, come to Silicon Valley to create your startup, right? How do we change the tenor to come to New Mexico to create your startup, right? Not just create your startup here, right? If you think about it, and there are things that you can do to make it feel exciting. I spent a lot of time in Alaska a couple of years ago, and they were all about tourism, and yet they wanted to have an entrepreneurial ecosystem. This place beats it an order of magnitude, but people still think about it as a vacation hub. They don't. Oh yeah, and it has labs, and a couple great universities. But they mostly think about it as, and so how do we just start changing it? This is the place that you want to come. The good thing is you don't have to create everything about startups here, right? 7, 8 years ago, if you ask somebody to talk about startups, they say, well, you have to basically duplicate Israel or duplicate Silicon Valley. You have to create everything locally. You don't have to do that anymore. You can do a virtual Silicon Valley. You can just double down on what you do well. You don't need the lawyer to be here. The lawyer could be somewhere else. You don't even need the CFO to be here, right? The CFO. So some of these people, they just can be elsewhere. You can also, I've worked with a couple of companies now that do not have office space and they are doing hard tech. They have a few labs, but they do not have an office. What does that mean? It means you need to change what you think of as a hub. A hub only has to be critical in a few things. It doesn't have to offer everything. And what you can do is have partnerships across these other things. And those partnerships are, you want to choose. Do you want to make partnerships out of the country, right? I mean, what's going to happen in the next 10 years? Latin America, Central America is going to be much more important than it is now. And, and there's opportunities for partnerships down that way to make people, cross-border work better. There are things with neighboring regions that offer stuff that you don't, right? Just think about, you don't have to do everything. And which ones do you want as a state to continue to double down and not waste time on the other things? So to me, that means that the trends are pointing positively to New Mexico. The challenges are, all of you live this much more than I do, but I can feel them, are still there, but I think there's some cracks happening, and I think there's real opportunity. So for me as me as a startup person, a failed startup person maybe, fallen at least, I would want to say that a couple of things I would love, and I know that people don't like this, but I'm going to say it again, and I know Lisa's not going to like it. Licensing technology is painful. It just is painful. As a startup person who has weeks of dollars or no dollars, it's painful. And I'm not saying UNM, I've never licensed from UNM, so I'm not talking about, but I know everywhere else I license from. From Stanford on down, it's painful. Painful. It should be shrink wrap license. It should be a shrink. There's a thing in venture called a safe note, okay? Why isn't, there's some movement, Oren in Colombia and others, why isn't there a safe note for licensing? I just go there and I just go, yeah, I don't want that. I just want it, and why isn't it simpler? The second thing is, I mentioned is, we need more spaces like biospace and for the other industries. The other one is, I talked about is C-suite incentives. One or two programs that make C-suites incentives. And lastly, while new companies can form here, can they stay here? So what is the strategy for the 20 plus employee company to scale? I sit on a lot of boards in my career where when the company gets to over 10, we start saying, well, can you build it there? And usually the answer is, it's going to be tough, right? So what are the strategies for the company that wants to scale? The company who has 30 employees wants to go to 100. Why is that important? If you have those programs, I'm much more willing to fund a company locally that's going to go from 0 to 20. If I know that there's programs for 20 to 100, then I go, well, then we should stay. A lot of the good programs, the LEAD program and others are great for kickstarting, but for scaling is important as a funder. Those are the four that I would love to see, changes happening next year, plus all the good part. So to me, I'm double down on, I think there are going to be a bunch of unicorns coming out of New Mexico, Roadrunner and Rainforest and, Q Station and others, I hope will, and Fat Pipe, I hope are contributing to creating them. And I am very excited to be part of this ecosystem, to have worked with Adam to create Roadrunner in this ecosystem. And I think the opportunity's there. So thank you.